What's up, everybody? Today is September 25th, 2023, otherwise known as National One Hit Wonder Day. Get out there, get the music playing, whether that be Dex's Midnight Runners, Come On Eileen, maybe Gautier's Somebody I Used to Know, or, one of my personal favorites, The Knack, and My Sharona. There's a bunch of great one-hit wonders out there, but we're going to start by appreciating some of our favorite one-hit wonders in sports, starting with the Madden 12 cover athlete from the Cleveland Browns, Peyton Hillis. In 2010, he ran for 1,177 yards and 11 touchdowns while catching two more touchdowns, which eventually led for him to be voted onto the cover of Madden 12. It was really kind of a surprise. He really broke out of nowhere. He was more of a fullback than he was a running back. But following being named to the cover of Madden, he only played four more seasons in the league where he ran for a combined 1,258 yards, and he never really caught on after that. Certainly a one hit wonder for the Cleveland Browns through their tumultuous 2010 spree. Another great one hit wonder would be David Tyree, who is known for making the spectacular helmet catch in the 2008 Super Bowl to help the Giants end the New England Patriots' undefeated streak. Um, it was absolutely crazy. He was able to go over the top of Rodney Harrison, throw that ball right down on his helmet to finish the grab. And the most remarkable part about that is that actually was his last career catch. He never had another reception in the NFL following that one in the Super Bowl. Pretty remarkable that he was able to come through in the biggest of moments. Another fantastic one-hit wonder is a guy that truly hit, and that'd be Buster Douglas. In 1991, he pulled off arguably the biggest upset in the history of sports, bigger than any 16 seeds over one seeds. He knocked off the great Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet, over in Japan. However, 8 months later, Douglas would lose his next fight to Evander Holyfield, and he never saw the spotlight ever again after that. Uh, it was really just, I was kind of surprised looking through his record and tracking how what happened after that. He just was in a really small profile fights, never really got another chance to go make a name for himself, never a rematch with Tyson or anything like that. So certainly a one hit wonder was Buster Douglas. And then the last one I'd like to point out is Aristides Aquino of the Cincinnati Reds. Man, Aristide in August of 2019 was maybe the greatest baseball player to have ever played. He was a red hot for Cincinnati, no pun intended. He hit 11 home runs in his first 17 games, including a three home run game, and he set an NL rookie record for 14 home runs in the month of August. However, following that end of his 2019 season, he only played three more years in the big leagues, racking up 22 total more home runs compared to his 194 strikeouts, and finished with a career batting average of 211. Yeah, tough one for Aristide and for all the Reds fans out there. But I hope that you guys have a great National One Hit Wonder Day and get that music playing. No Drake, no Taylor Swift, only the people that couldn't make it big time. Speaking of making it big time, what a huge weekend it was for us here on the channel. I went 6-1 this weekend, including 4-0 in college football to move our college football record to 6 wins to one loss and plus 7.57 units. That's absolutely terrific. Not only that, our NFL went 2-1 this weekend to put us at a 4-4 record and only down 0.43 units. A lot of people say we were barking this weekend, but we were howling. We were howling like a werewolf under a full moon that just saw Kristen Stewart topless. Man, we were howling and barking like crazy. It was a great weekend out there, and I'm hoping to have even better picks coming up for you on Friday. Uh, I'm just absolutely thrilled. You look through the picks we had. TCU played pretty well. West Virginia took care of business. Washington State took care of business. Showed why DJ, the fraud quarterback for Oregon State. And then, if any of you guys watched the Texas State Nevada game, that was maybe one of the most sweatiest bets I've ever had in my entire life. So we had to remind you guys Nevada plus 17.5, and at halftime they were winning 17-0. That means we basically had a 34 points to work with until next thing we know, we were losing the game 35-17. If it wasn't for a late long bomb by the backup quarterback to eventually bring a touchdown in late to cover, we would have been very sad for one of the worst bad beats in the football season. However, like I said, we were able to finish off 4-0. Plus 7.57 units is huge, and I really hope you guys are continuing to ride those in the land of UFC. The Poppy Parlay hit this weekend at plus 298. We will have him on later this weekend or later this week to continue to talk about that. So I'm not going to touch on it quite yet. But diving into the weekend of college football, the first thing I want to talk about is I want to send a little bit of thoughts and prayers to the Colorado football team for the beating they took at the hands of Oregon. Dan Lanning and the boys really took care of business. Bo Nick played well. Shador Sanders did not have a great game. I know half the nation's probably pretty excited to see Colorado go down, while the other half is pretty bummed that their boys weren't able to recover. But Colorado's not done yet. Don't write them off. If you think that's it for Colorado, you're delusional. Like Dion said, if you're going to get him, you better get him now because that team's only going to get better every single year he's there. And I believe that as well. He's one of the best recruiters in the nation. And that team's just going to continually get more and more talent. So that was a great game. And another great game was the Ohio State Notre Dame game. What a call by Ohio State at the end of the game to run for it, to get it in there late. However, Notre Dame had 10 guys on the field for the last two plays of the game. Marcus Freeman said he didn't want to take a penalty to get the 11th guy on the field. However, it's one of those things when you're on the 2 yard line, if you're giving up a half a yard to get that guy on there with the penalty, you have to make that. You have to make that change. It's inevitable. You've got to make that change. Absolutely embarrassing display by Notre Dame towards the end of the game. And I also think it was very embarrassing the post-game interview that Ryan Day gave for Ohio State, calling out Lou Holtz, who's older than dirt. I just think that was in poor taste. And obviously, it's one of those things that, after a big win, you have about a minute to think about it before you have the cameras and microphones in your face. And sometimes those emotions get the best of you. I like to think of the Richard Sherman interview going after Michael Crabtree in terms of what it means when you have those emotions high in an interview. But I just thought it was kind of crappy and in poor taste. Um, so moving over to the world of the NFL, we had a bunch of good games on Saturday. Um, One of them included the one losing bet for us this weekend in the NFL, the Cleveland Browns taking care of the Tennessee Titans by a score of 27-3. I thought Deshaun Watson played his best game as a Brown in his career so far. He was 27 of 33 for 289 yards and two touchdowns. They looked real good, honestly, really good, even without Nick Chubb. They were able to get Amari Cooper working. He had 7 catches for 116 yards and a touchdown. Meanwhile, Tennessee was awful. Their defense didn't look good. Their offense didn't look good. Derrick Henry had 11 carries for 20 yards. That's an average of 1.8 yards per carry. You expect a lot more out of him, especially the way he runs and how physical he is. Um, Tannehill completed 13 passes for 104 yards. That's 4.2 yards per completion. Abysmal and embarrassing. And I can't believe that I picked the Titans, and that's one that that's going to haunt me for a little while. Another one I want to touch on is the Green Bay Packers and the New Orleans Saints. Uh, there are probably several people, myself included, who may have missed that end of that game because they wrote it off. I was definitely one of those. I thought the game was over. However, Jordan Love looked incredible in the fourth quarter, looking at some of the throws and plays he made. You had about 3 quarters of wishing you had Aaron Rodgers back, and then that fourth quarter reminding you why you love Jordan. He was 22 of 44 for 259 yards and a touchdown. Um, you know, those numbers look good on the surface, but when you watch the game throughout, he really looked shaky in the first half of that game. Really was struggling not only to make some throws, but to find his footing. Slipped a couple of times, had some bad accuracy on that. But they eventually got it going late. Derek Carr got hurt for the Saints. He played well while he was healthy. Olave had another good game with 8 catches and 104 yards. But yeah, they choked that one late, and it's not like Jameis Winston was exactly a bad player for them when he had to come in relief of Derek Carr. He completed 10 of his 16 passes for 101 yards. He didn't have any turnovers. Um, it's just eventually that Saints defense could not stop what Jordan Love was doing there in the fourth quarter. if you're the Packers, you're starting to think that you have something real with Jordan Love. This is the third straight game in which he's really shown some true talent. He's a dog. What can I say? He's truly a dog. And if you're the Saints, you're hoping that Derek Carr injury is not very severe. I've heard it's not very severe from what I've heard. I think it's just a separated shoulder, would maybe miss 1 week. But next week they are getting Alvin Kamara back, which will be a huge boost to that offense, as their running game was not very interesting this week. Kendre Miller had 9 carries for 34 yards. Tony Jones 8 carries for 31 yards. Taysom Hill ran it 4 times for 12 yards. Uh, yeah, they need to get Kamara back just due to the variety of offense he can bring in both the running game as well as the receiving game. Another interesting game to note was an NFL history making game as the Miami Dolphins put up 70 points on the Denver Broncos. 70. That's right. They had over 700 yards of total offense and scored 10 touchdowns. Man, oh man, it hurts to be a Broncos fan after watching that one. Tua Tagovailoa had 23 completions out of 26 attempts for 309 yards and 4 touchdowns. And even in relief, backup Mike White went 2 for 2 for 67 yards and a touchdown. In the running game, Devon Achane, 18 carries, 203 yards and 2 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert, 13 carries, 82 yards, 3 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill had 9 catches, 157 yards, and a touchdown. A. Shane, 4 catches, 30 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert had a receiving touchdown. Robbie Chosen had a receiving touchdown. And it's just absolutely an embarrassing display for that Broncos defense. And if you're Vance Joseph, you may as well resign ASAP. You look at what that Broncos team was doing last year. Their offense was horrendous, but the fact that they had one of the best defenses in the league was able to keep them in a lot of games. And this year, the offense has not been terrible, but that defense has continually let them down. Even late in the game, when Robbie Chosen scored that long touchdown from Mike White, they burned Patrick Surtain, which is a guy that usually doesn't get burnt. Uh, there's a lot of issues over there in Denver as they fall to 0-3, and their season is likely over before it's even beginning. For Russ, 23 completions and 38 attempts, 306 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Javonte Williams wasn't really running the ball well, 11 carries, 42 yards. Cortland Sutton had a nice game with 8 catches, 91 yards, and a touchdown, but I believe he had 2 fumbles, which is going to hurt you when you can't take care of the ball and give the Dolphins some better field position. However, he was getting open and he did make some good catches in traffic. Sutton's a guy that I think the Broncos need to continually invest in alongside Jerry Jeudy to help Russ get better. Another game from that morning slate that I'm going to cover was the team that really drastically needed to get a win the most, the Los Angeles Chargers. They knocked off the Minnesota Vikings by a score of 28-24. The Chargers moved to 1-2, while the Vikings moved to 0-3, and respectfully end their season. Justin Herbert, 40 completions and 47 attempts for 405 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Keenan Allen also threw a pass for 49 yards and a touchdown to Mike Williams. They just announced on Twitter about 20 minutes before I recorded this, Mike Williams has torn his ACL. He is out for the year. And guys, it is time to be real. Very first time in a video you will be seeing this. It is time to be real. For all you guys that know what that is on social media, you know how important it is that you do not miss when it comes to getting your be real out there. So a little bad podcasting out there, but we're going to get it up there. Uh, Continuing on with our Chargers Vikings talk. Um, Absolutely tough loss for the Chargers, losing Mike Williams for the year to a torn ACL. Tough loss personally for my fantasy team. That stinks. He was in my flex. Um, but they were able to rebound on their season, getting their first win and not quite making their season worthless. Meanwhile, on the side of the Vikings, Kirk Cousins had another decent game, 32 of 50, 367 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Alexander Madison struggled to maintain the ball again. Justin Jefferson had 7 catches for 149 yards and a touchdown, but none of that mattered as the Chargers finished them off when it mattered late in the game. And the Vikings, man, you got to wonder if it's time for them to maybe look to sell off some of their pieces and start that rebuild, gain some draft assets or younger players. Because when you're 0-3, you're just not going to make the playoffs anymore, and that's the spot they find themselves in. Kirk Cousins will be a free agent at the end of the year. Maybe you can trade him and find some value there. Danielle Hunter has 5 sacks on the year. He might be a guy who'll be able to move for some draft picks for a team looking for some defensive end help. At the end of the day, the Vikings are they're toast, and it's a sad end of the season for a team that played such good football last year. And I do feel bad for Kirk Cousins, as I would like to see him have a better a team around him, but unfortunately, there's only so much you can do. Um, Finishing up that morning slate, the Buffalo Bills knocked off the Commanders 37-3 in a pretty blowout game there. Washington never really got much going, and Howell had his worst game of the season. The Lions defeated the Falcons 20-6. The Falcons couldn't really get their running game going throughout and made Desmond Ritter look very average. The Lions, Jared Goff played well. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a good game, but Sam Laporta really shined through, their rookie tight end. And Jameer Gibbs without David Montgomery kind of showed why he was a first round pick there. Um, in a surprise game, the Texans knocked off the Jaguars. CJ Stroud looked really good. The Jaguars did not look good, period. Trevor Lawrence kind of struggled a little bit throughout the game, at least in comparison to Stroud. Stroud was 20 of 30 for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. While on the flip side, Trevor Lawrence was 27 of 40, 279 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Um, that's a game that definitely shocked people. I don't think the Texans were expected to win very many games. I know the Jaguars had a lot of hype around them, but yeah, that's a bad loss if you're Jacksonville. Speaking of another bad loss, the New England Patriots were able to get it done by a score of 15-10 over the New York Jets. Zach Wilson is horrendous, and that is the story of that game. The Patriots weren't good, but they're better than Zach Wilson. The Jets season is also probably one of those seasons that is already over before it's begun. It may have been over the second Aaron Rodgers got hurt, but the way that O line is and the way that Zach Wilson plays, it's an over season right there for sure. And the last game of that early morning slate was the Indianapolis Colts, led by Gardner Minshew, knocking off the Baltimore Ravens in overtime. It's always one of those things where you never know how you feel after your first round pick quarterback doesn't play and your team still wins. It makes you wonder if you made the right decision getting that quarterback. I thought Gardner Minshew played pretty well. Um, Baltimore's just really struggling to find an identity right now. They've had a lot of running backs get hurt. Obviously, they lost J.K. Dobbins early. Justice Hill did not play in this game, and Gus Edwards left this game with an injury. They got to figure out a way to get Lamar comfortable running the football, but also passing the football. When you have guys like Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham and Mark Ingram, excuse me, not Mark Ingram, Mark Andrews at tight end, you should have some good passing and good receivers out there, and that's just not what we've seen from Baltimore quite yet. They need to have a little bit more faith in that offense besides just running the football. Moving on to the afternoon slate, the Seattle Seahawks knocked off the Carolina Panthers by a score of 37-27 in a game that was closer than I expected. Andy Dalton looked pretty dang good for the Carolina Panthers as they put up much more of a fight than I expected. I thought Seattle was going to blow them out, but when Dalton goes 34 for 58, 361 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and understands why the offense was flowing there. He and Adam Thielen had a great connection. Thielen had 11 catches, 145 yards, and a touchdown. DJ Chark was also pretty active in that passing game, scoring a touchdown with 86 receiving yards. Meanwhile, for Seattle, they were able to get it done on the ground a little bit. They were able to feed Kenneth Walker to a tune of 18 carries, 97 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Meanwhile, Gino was pretty respectful through the air, 23 of 36, 296 yards, and 1 touchdown to 1 interception. He found Metcalf 6 times for 112 yards. However, he wasn't really been able to connect with Lockett. Only found him 3 times, 34 yards. And the only passing touchdown he threw was to Bobo for 1 catch for 5 yards. With that said, Seattle still got the job done. Still looking like a good offensive team, even though, they gave up 27 points to a backup quarterback. That's something they should be able to figure out here in the coming weeks uh, as they continually play and get used to what they have out there defensively, getting Witherspoon and Woolen on the same page. Uh, Another very interesting afternoon game was the fact that the Dallas Cowboys got upset by the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals were not expected to win a game, period, this year, rolling with Josh Dobbs as their quarterback. They choked a big old lead after halftime to the Giants, who are bad as well. Yet despite that, they were able to take care of business against the Dallas Cowboys. Dobbs played pretty safely. He had 17 for 21, 189 yards, and one touchdown. James Conner was able to get the ball running on the ground, 14 carries, 98 yards, and a touchdown. But when you flip it to the Dallas side of things, they were horrendous offensively. Dak Prescott looked awful. His numbers don't show as bad as they should be. They have him 25 of 40, 249 yards, one touchdown, one interception, but that interception was an awful read. He didn't put that ball anywhere close to where the receiver was. Uh, when you look at the receiving stats, CeeDee Lamb, 4 catches, 53 yards. That's something that you can't have. You have to get him way more involved in the offense. They were running Tony Pollard well, 23 carries, 122 yards. But when you lose to the Cardinals, especially when you had Travion Diggs tear his ACL earlier in the week, a lot of misfortune in Cowboyville right now. And what went from being a potential Super Bowl contender, now you're kind of beginning to question what this team really is. And that's been the story of the Cowboys for several years now. And then the last game of the afternoon slate was the Kansas City Chiefs beating up on the Chicago Bears 41-10 in a game that went back exactly as we expected it. However, there was a little bit more fanfare in the crowd than on the field, but we may touch on that later this week. We will see as those rumors began to progress. Lastly, we move on to Sunday Night Football as the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to pick up a big win over the Las Vegas Raiders by a score of 23-18. Kenny Pickett, 16 of 28, 235 yards, and two touchdowns. This was probably the best game of Najee Harris's season thus far, 19 carries for 65 yards. That's still not super impressive. Pickens and Pickett have beginning to get a little combination working out there as Pickett was able to have 4 catches for 75 yards. On the flip side for Las Vegas, Jimmy Garoppolo, 28 of 44, 324 yards, two touchdowns, three interceptions. He definitely made some very errant throws that were kind of questionable at times. Josh Jacobs has not been able to get the ball going. And he's just, ever since that holdup, he was the NFL's leading rusher last year, and he looks bad this year. 17 carries, 62 yards. This was another one of those Devontae Adams games like he was known for in Green Bay with Rodgers. 13 receptions, 172 yards, two touchdowns. He was targeted 20 times. You might as well call him 7-11 because he's open 24/7. He was just had a phenomenal game and showed why he's continually one of the best wide receivers in the NFL year in and year out. Um, it's a shame that he's stuck on a team like the Raiders uh, without a very good quarterback, without very good roster, without very good coaching. He's definitely regretting getting away from Rodgers, and he's definitely upset that Derek Carr is no longer with that team. It'll be interesting to see if he ever asks for a trade or tries to get out of Vegas the way that season's going. Moving on to Monday Night Football tonight, we have another doubleheader, which I'm super excited for. 6:15 Central Time, Philadelphia Eagles travel to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. The Eagles are 5-point favorites in that game. Meanwhile, at 7:15 Central Time, the LA Rams will travel to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are -3. We have yet to fully know Joe Burrow's status for this game for the Bengals. He's been listed questionable all week long. It will be interesting to see if he suits up. For the Stripes out there who are set to debut their white tiger uniforms tonight. Um, I'm going to say that I think the Eagles will cover their five against the Buccaneers. I think we'll finally have a game that makes Baker Mayfield look a little bit more human than he has the past couple weeks. That Eagles defense is very sturdy, especially that defensive line. I expect them to give Baker some problems, not make him so comfortable, and they have a lot better secondary than most of the teams they've played, which should help contain Mike Evans. Meanwhile, in that Bengals Rams game, it's really hard for me to call a line right now, especially not knowing Joe Burrow's status. But I will probably just take Rams +3 to err on the side of caution that Burrow does not play. I know that Puka is also going to be questionable for the Rams. He would be another big loss for them as Cooper Kupp is still out and he's been the main receiver for them. Uh, but they do seem to have quite a bit of faith in Kyron Williams, their new running back, especially after they traded Cam Akers away to Minnesota. The Rams, a lot of expectations were lower for them this year compared to years past after a dreadful year last year due to injuries. They're playing some good football. They were pretty competent against the 49ers last week. I'll still take them +3, like I said. So I hope you guys had a great weekend full of football and sports. There was some great soccer games that were played. The North London Derby was super exciting between Arsenal and Tottenham. Hyun-min Son had a great game. Meanwhile, Newcastle beat up and absolutely killed Sheffield by a score of 8-0. They just absolutely dominated that one. And Aston Villa was able to take care of business against Chelsea, who continually ends up in the mud. So let me know in the comments below what your best part of your weekend was, what you think is going to happen tonight on Monday Night Football. And most importantly, guys, let me know if you think that are Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift an elite couple? Hopefully, that will be discussed on later this week. Like I said, on Friday, we should have Poppy back again to talk about more UFC, as well as the success of the Poppy Parlay that he had over this past weekend. And I will see you guys then. Remember, stay blessed.